I think this is finally the year where they actually put a ton of weight on the strength of schedule argument. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. Happy to have you here with us today. Last December, Notre Dame, they went 10-2. They finished in the top 11 of the college football playoff rankings, 11 in a 12-team playoff, and they did not make the field. Remember that, right? They were so annoyed that they said, we're not even playing a bowl game. They stayed at home. Meanwhile, the last two seeds went to Tulane and James Madison. That's right. Two group of 5 teams. So you look at some other great teams. BYU didn't make it. They were 12-2. Yeah, it didn't work out in the Big 12 title game. And the committee said, Miami's in, right? That was the sport we watched last year. Here's the sport we're about to watch. The college football playoff parameters have been tweaked again, right? This time there's a memorandum of understanding that every conference and that Notre Dame signed, and we are going to have conference champions. We're going to have play-ins. But really, it was all about the 16-team format, maybe the 24-team format, the expansion possibility, right? That's been a big discussion. We've had a deadline, and they could not agree on possible expansion. So those that are holding the pen of the future of the sport, no one really knows exactly where they're going to end up. So today, we are going to put our thumbprint, our fingerprints on what this year's playoff might look like. Because a couple weeks ago, we gave you our top 25. That's kind of how we see the field right now. Well, today we're going to have to project a little bit. We're going to project what the committee is going to value. And it's going to be a little different this year than it's been in the past. Because this might be the year that strength of schedule is valued more heavily than the win-loss record. And if I'm right about that, that means that someone is going to finish with a really pretty record and they're still not going to get in because a team that's, say, 9-3 that played a ridiculous strength of schedule will be rewarded. I happen to think this is the year it happens. I'll explain why in a moment. But before we do, go ahead, subscribe to the podcast. Or if you get the podcast, doesn't matter where, just subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review. That's awesome. We appreciate all those. It makes us feel good. We also appreciate those of you that are telling your friends about what we're doing here. We're all ball here. Like, we are just calling balls and strikes. It's simple as that. We're a throwback, but we hope you enjoy it. And we also encourage you to check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. Tons of cut-ups that might include your favorite team on there as well. So I'm going to tell you why the committee room, I think, is about to change. And depending on what conference you're in, it might be changing for the better or it might be changing for the worse. Let me build the case, because everything I give you after this is going to rest on this case. I don't think it's a hunch. The machinery has been moving in this direction for the last couple of years. And before last season, the committee actually rebuilt their tools. They took strength of schedule number and they reweighted it so the games against strong opponents could count for more. And they added a brand new one called record strength. And here's the design in plain English. Basically, you beat a great team, you get a big reward. You lose to a great team, you get punished, but barely. You beat a bad team, you get almost nothing. You lose to a bad team, and it's more penal than it's ever been. And it's not a neutral tool. It's a tool that's built to help programs that schedule up. And it came out of a big campaign, and the loudest voice in that campaign was a league that had just watched itself get locked out of the national championship game for the last couple of years. That same league this year went to 9 conference games. It's the first time in a really long time that the Southeastern Conference is actually requiring you to play 10 power conference opponents, 9 conference plus 1 power team on top of it. And if you listen to Greg Sankey's own words when they announced it, he said the format ensures that the SEC teams will be well prepared to compete and succeed in the college football playoff. That's not a scheduling press release. That was a league that was kind of re-engineering its resume to fit a metric that was helped put forth by it and the Big Ten. Now, the Big Ten and the Big 12, they've been at 9 for a while. The ACC is going to be at 9 for 12 of their 17 teams. And there's there's 5 teams that play 8 games still, but that's because they couldn't get rid of the old non-conference deals. So the format's changed, but everyone's playing stronger schedules, right? So for the first time in the history of this thing, specific conferences also have automatic bids. It's not the highest ranked conference champions. That's what happened last year. That's why Tulane and James Madison got in, because they were both ranked higher than the ACC champion, the Duke Blue Devils. But the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC by name all will send their champions to the college football playoff. And then you have the highest ranked team from outside of those 4 leagues, plus Notre Dame, that will automatically make it if they finish in the top 12. So you have another conference champion plus Notre Dame, assuming they're in the top 12. And then, of course, you have the 7 at-large chairs for the rest of the sport before the committee even really sits down. Now, here's the number that should potentially end the argument. If you apply this year's rules to last year's seasons, then 2 teams that made the playoff do not make it. That means James Madison would be out, and guess who else? That'd be Miami. They would not have made it under this year's version of the rules. So Notre Dame would have been in favor of Miami, and then Tulane would have been kept in because they were the G6 champion, right? So an ACC team that went to the national championship game would not have been in the field under the rules that we're playing by this fall. So when you get a bracket in a few minutes with exactly 1 ACC team and exactly 1 Big 12 team in it, I'm not being cute. I'm reading the room that has already kind of told us how they intend to behave. Now, the part that nobody really explains is that those 4 automatic bids, they don't necessarily care what your record is, which means a 9-4 team can make the college football playoff this year. Let's say you go 8-4 in the regular season, you get hot on a first Saturday of December, and your team knocks off maybe a previously undefeated team from your own conference in the championship game. Well, guess what? You're 9-4, and you're holding a bid, while the 11-1 or a 10-2 team that played really well all season long, they're sitting there watching from the couch potentially, right? So the fact that last year's version of Duke got in at 7-5, probably not going to happen again because they've adjusted the tiebreakers, but still, it's not a bug. This is the new system that we got to get really, really comfortable with. So getting that championship game is its own minefield, right? Because every one of these leagues now takes their top 2, and almost nobody can tell you how a tie gets broken right now. I mean, the Big 10 has a ton of different tiebreakers, for example, 6 different tiebreakers. Well, step 5 is essentially a computer rating. The SEC runs a similar ladder. The Big 12 keeps it pretty simple, head-to-head, then common opponents. And the ACC rewrote theirs back in July, which is the most interesting thing, and it might have gotten about 4 minutes of coverage when it actually came out. 2 teams tied, it's head-to-head, and if that doesn't settle it, then it's a computer rating that decides who plays for the league title. So that's the second step, not the 6th. So pretty interesting the way the ACC has decided to approach it and the way the Big 12 has decided to approach it. And because you have ACC teams that are playing different amounts of conference games, it will be really interesting, right? So a 7-1 team and a 7-2 team, remember there's a bunch of teams playing 9, there's a bunch of teams playing 8. Those 2 teams would essentially be tied. Same wins, different records, run the procedure. So no one else in America is doing it that way, but they ran a bunch of different simulations, and it's kind of fascinating. So here's what I'm actually predicting, though, because it's going to be uncomfortable as I reveal my playoff teams here in just a moment. The power in the sport sits with 2 leagues, right? We all know that. It means the SEC and the Big 10, they have more power, and that power is meaningful. And they are right now determining what the future of the college football playoff looks like. So if for whatever reason they don't get what they want, which is a heavier weight towards strength of schedule, then that would be bad news for the bigger picture playoff. That's just my assumption, right? Which means I'm going to take it one step further. I think there's going to be a Big 12 team that finishes with a really, really nice record that will be left out in favor of what might be a 9-3 SEC team that doesn't even come close to winning the conference championship game, right? So they might have a team that's, say, 11-2 that's on the couch, and 9-3 gets a seat. And before you tell me that that's never happened, I mean, go look at what happened 8 months ago, right? Alabama made the field as the first 3-loss team in the history of the college football playoff, and they had just been beaten by 21 by Georgia in the SEC title. So they got in at number 9. Meanwhile, Notre Dame, who at 10-2 looked really good the last 10 games, they stayed at home. And the committee chair cited strength of schedule and that it was the highest of anyone in the top 11. And in spite of what happened in Atlanta the day before, they deserved to stay right where they were, which understood, made sense to an extent. I think it's still hard for people to understand, but I think that's going to go up even more this year because the SEC and the Big Ten have increased the strength of schedule for some of their championship contenders. The Big Ten schedules at the top are much harder than they've been the last couple of years, and the SEC adopted the ninth conference game. So I'm just saying, get ready. I think you're going to see a scenario where those two leagues are given the benefit of the doubt because of the strength of schedule argument. So let's now forecast where our college football playoff projections are going. We'll start with the conference championships. People say they don't matter. Well, they do this year. They might not in the future. They do this year. Why? Because the winner of those 4 conference championship games gets an automatic bid to the college football playoff, right? So let's start in the Big Ten. I have Ohio State beating Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. I have Ohio State sitting there at 11-1 in the regular season. They win it in Indianapolis. They're my number 1 team. They're the AP's number 1 team. And the market currently has them at like 9.5 wins. So they're number 1 for me for a reason. And you look at that 1 in the loss column, you have to wonder, where's it coming? Is it week 2 in Austin? Maybe. I mean, the markets are telling you right now that the number 1 team in America is a coin flip on the second Saturday of the season in one of the very, very difficult places in the sport to go play. So I look at the team across from them, Oregon, love them. I don't know exactly where their losses might fall. I think they'll have 2 potentially in the regular season, 10-2, 11-1 in that vicinity, but they will lose to the Buckeyes. They're in the conference championship game, and they will finish as the Big Ten runner-up. In the SEC, I have the Georgia Bulldogs at 11-2 beating the Texas Longhorns. Georgia goes 10-2, gets to Atlanta. And you look at Kirby Smart, 10-2 in a 9-game league is not necessarily a disappointment. It's just a tax. And he pays it and yet still walks out with the trophy. Meanwhile, Texas finishes 10-2 in the regular season with a loss in the conference championship game, but still a 10-3 team with that schedule, arguably the 3rd toughest in America with Ohio State in the non-conference, is a really good season. It will be more than enough to make the college football playoff. The ACC, I have the Miami Hurricanes beating the Louisville Cardinals, which is something that's been a little bit. I know Miami's going to be there. Who are they going to be playing against? I have them playing against Louisville right now. So Miami, I have them going 11-1. Probably assume where that 1 loss is coming. If you look at their schedule, it's probably a little bit easier to pick out. I had them 11-1, 12-1 after they win the ACC. So we'll see exactly where things play out right there. Then I want to get to the Big 12, where I have BYU at 11-2 beating Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game. I think Texas Tech and BYU are both going to be right there in the mix. I think BYU gets it done this year. I really believe that this is the year that the Cougars, with everything they bring back, they're going to make the college football playoff as the Big 12 champion. And then who is my G6 champion going to be? I went around and around and around. It'd be real easy for me to pick a very obvious one, whether it's James Madison or Tulane or Boise. I'm actually going in a slightly different direction. After surveying the entire G6 world, I'm going with Fresno State to make it as the G6 champion. I have them going 11-2 and beating Boise State in the Pac-12 championship game. I have them 10-2 in the regular season, hosting the conference championship game as the top seed and winning it. And the team they beat is Boise, which they're playing them again in the regular season as well. They're hosting Boise. I think they can get that game won, believe it or not. That's on October 10th. So the winner of that game might host the Pac-12 title game. That's why I'm leaning towards Fresno to take it home and punch their ticket. So those are our champions. BYU, I have Ohio State out of the Big Ten. I have in the ACC the Miami Hurricanes, and in the SEC the Georgia Bulldogs, with the G6 representative being the newly formed Pac-12, the representative out of the Pac-12. I have Fresno winning it in year number 1. Now, getting into the at-large conversation, and this is where it gets interesting. Because in some of the things that I've forecasted, for example, let's use Texas Tech. I have Texas Tech at 10-2 or 11-1 in the regular season, which would be one of the best records in the sport. They would be amazing. But losing to BYU and finishing the season, say 11-2, well, you look at that 11-1 resume that they built, it's going to be a little more empty than some of the teams they might be measured against. So how would a Texas Tech stack up when you look at the schedule that they play? Didn't play BYU in the regular season, don't play Utah in the regular season, do like a few other teams in the Big 12, but there are a few more unknowns. How will they stack up? So let's factor it in now with the at-large sevens and the seeds, right? Because we have the 5 champions in, which means there's 7 shares left for the 12-team playoff. Notre Dame is going to be sitting in one of them, right? They're going to be there. And I have Notre Dame going 12-0. I have them, when forecasting the college football playoff and looking way in advance, they are going to be my number 1 overall seed. They're going to be my only undefeated team on the board right now. And the market loves them, right? They're 11 and a half wins, depending on where it is, the highest number in America. And they also enter in with the number 1 returning production. They bring back more than just about anybody. The top 12 clause makes them automatic, and the clause doesn't do much for them anyways because they're not like they're sneaking into the top 12. They're the number 1 seed. All right, so the Irish are in. I also have Indiana in, the defending national champions. And it got a little bit harder, right? Because there was a point in this fall camp where we thought they would be able to rely on 2 defensive linemen that we thought they were going to be their defensive ends. And then the 10th Circuit and the Big Ten ruled that they cannot play. But I still look at what this team has. And I mean, this is not small to have to replace those 2 guys, but their D-line's still outstanding. I still have them at 10-2. But I had the likelihood of them winning a national championship maybe slightly higher just a couple days ago. I have Alabama in at 10-2. Now, the market says around 8.5. I'm saying 10-2 with a quarterback that's thrown 15 passes in his entire college career. But Keelan Russell was one of the top recruits in the country, the highest ranked player that Alabama's ever signed. And he didn't back into this. I mean, he had to go out and beat a 4th-year player that followed Kalen DeBoer from Washington. And Kalen took a couple weeks to evaluate, but it sounds like since the first scrimmage to the second, Keelan Russell went like this on just an absolute parabolic shot towards winning that starting job. And it's the decisiveness, the ability to expand the play. I think the offense is going to be just as good. I think they're going to be very dynamic with Keelan Russell at quarterback. But I also look, yes, they return not a lot, but that might not be the worst thing, especially when you take into account how underwhelming that offensive line was. But this might very well be a defense-first football team because I think all 3 levels for the Tide on defense have a chance to be outstanding. The USC Trojans, I have them in the college football playoff as well. Now, I have told you already how Lincoln Riley has performed against ranked opponents. And it's not an impressive record. It has not been great. He's just 6-13 against ranked opponents at SC. Still true. I'm not walking away from that. However, I am putting USC in the playoff, and here's the honest reason. He is in year 5 with the most stable roster he's had in Los Angeles. And I don't think 10-2 necessarily requires him to fix that number. He's got to go about 500 against ranked teams, right? Maybe even slightly better than that on their schedule this year. They have plenty of opportunities at home. And I also, from what I'm hearing, sounds like the physical presence in the front 7 defensively is different this year. And that's from people that have no ties to SC whatsoever. So we loved them coming into the season anyways. We now officially have them in our college football playoff projections. So you look at the AP poll and they're kind of all over the place. Even our poll, a little bit all over the place. But we have Oregon in at 10-3. We have Texas in at 10-3 as well. Even though they lose a conference championship game, both of them are comfortably in. That's not charity either, right? I mean, Oregon has been one of the more stable operations in the Big Ten for the last handful of years. And Texas plays a schedule that is coming from a horror movie and survives it. So neither one of those seasons are going to necessarily get punished by a committee acknowledging the difficult challenges that lie in front of them. The Oklahoma Sooners. I have Oklahoma going 9-3. I also have them in the college football playoff. I'm probably going to lose a few of you here. So let me just plant the flag just for a minute. A 9-3 Oklahoma playoff team is going to be in in favor of an 11-2 team that doesn't have the marquee wins. You look at 5 of Oklahoma's 12 opponents. They all finished last season in the top 18. So going to Michigan out of conference, having to open league play in Athens. So yes, there are some very, very difficult games on that schedule. But there's also some that they'll get which will only help their resume when looking at the bigger picture. And you talk already about the committee and how they've spent 2 years kind of rebuilding their tools so that losing to great teams won't kill you like it once did. So this is the test case. If Oklahoma goes 9-3 against that gauntlet and they get left out of the playoff, then everything we heard the last couple of years is just flat out noise, right? I think they get in favor of a team from the ACC and the Big 12 that did not win their league but does not have the strength of schedule beside their name. So here are the 12 seeded. Number 1, Notre Dame, 12-0. Number 2, Ohio State, 12-1. Number 3, Miami, 12-1. And number 4, Georgia at 11-2. Those are the 4 that get the byes, okay? Now let's go 5 through 12. I have Texas in, slightly harder schedule than Oregon, both sitting at 10-3. Texas is 5, Oregon is 6. I have Indiana at 7, finishing 10-2. I have Alabama at 8, finishing 10-2. Remember, Alabama's schedule in the SEC not quite as daunting as the schedule that you see with Texas. It is, however, a little less daunting than the one you'd see from Oklahoma. However, Oklahoma, I forecast having one more loss. At number 9, it's SC. At number 10, it's BYU at 11-2, and the winner's the Big 12. Oklahoma is in at number 11 at 9-3, and Fresno State makes it as the 12 seed at 11-2. So it's 4 Big 10, 4 SEC, 1 ACC, 1 Big 12, Notre Dame, and a group of 6 champion. All 7 at-large chairs are used exactly. And I look at what I did with those seeds because I want you to I want to be held to a standard here, right? So I put Texas and Oregon ahead of Indiana because they played in the conference championship game. I have Indiana ahead of Alabama, ahead of SC, and ahead of BYU. So it's about right. So you have a pretty good situation. So yeah, there are a couple 3-loss teams that are in over teams with slightly better records, but those teams played in a conference title game. So if I'm going to spend this whole episode talking about the committee, not weighing these teams exclusively on wins and losses and standing on more than just resumes, then I can't just count losses when it's the most convenient, right? What this would lead towards is a really intriguing first round. You have Fresno State at Texas, and yeah, you want to go to Austin in December, not very fun. And Fresno playing just one Power 4 opponent all season. You get Texas on the road in a playoff game, that'll be tough sledding. You get Oklahoma at Oregon. Austin Stadium in December, a 9-3 team in the SEC that has spent the last month telling you they deserve to be here, even though plenty of people would push back against that, having to head to the Pacific Northwest. That would be a lot of fun to experience that game. You get number 10 BYU at number 7 Indiana. The Big 12 champ has to go to Bloomington and play the defending champ, where Bear Bachmeier gets to assess exactly how far this team has come. And it'll be a better game, a better game than I think people would realize, because BYU is as physical as anybody in the sport. And then number 9, USC will travel to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. Kalen DeBoer hosting Lincoln Riley, with Keelan Russell making his first playoff start in 2 programs that have been told for the last however many years they've been underachieving in recent years. Well, now they're playing for the opportunity to make it to the quarterfinals. So the quarterfinals will set up like this. Notre Dame will get the winner of Alabama SC. Ohio State gets the winner of Indiana BYU. Miami gets the winner of Oregon and Oklahoma. And then Georgia gets the winner of Texas and Fresno State. So a lot of exciting things to account for here, which leads us to the first 4 out. So you have number 13, Texas Tech at 11-2. You have number 14, Texas A&M at 9-3. You have number 15, Ole Miss at 9-3. And you have number 16, Penn State at 9-3. And probably need to stop at 13, right? Because you have an 11-2 Texas Tech team that is out of the playoff and a 9-3 Oklahoma team in it. That's a 2-game gap in the wrong direction, with Texas Tech having just played in the Big 12 championship game. And if you look at 6 of the teams that I have in the field, have a worse record than the record I'm forecasting for Texas Tech. And 11-2 It's the same as Georgia's record, who's the 4 seed, and BYU, who's clearly in the field as the Big 12 title team. So let me stop talking about records and just talk about resume. Put the two teams side by side. Texas Tech's schedule is one of the most manageable in the entire Power 4. And it's not, if they go undefeated, it's a different conversation. I don't know if they will. There's a few question marks, I think, with Texas Tech as they enter the season. So not playing BYU in the regular season, not playing Utah in the regular season. Their one shot at a signature win is in the conference title game, and I think they're going to lose it. So it's a gaudy number on top of a resume with not a ton underneath it. Meanwhile, Oklahoma, with a bunch of different big wins, even a 9-3 Oklahoma has 3 or 4 wins that would make the committee look twice at just what they are capable of when playing against some of the best teams in the country, including a road trip to Michigan in week 2. So, going to be fascinating to see. That's what I'm forecasting. I think this is finally the year where they actually put a ton of weight on the strength of schedule argument and the strength of record argument. Why? Because in just a matter of a few months, they're going to be discussing the future format of the college football playoff. And the SEC and the Big Ten, they hold all the weight. They carry the torch for what the future of the playoff format looks like. So this is the year where I think their teams receive the benefit of the doubt for having to run the gauntlet that they have to run in a 9-game conference schedule against some of the best teams in America. Now we'll keep doing what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, and that's Camp Confidential. These are not projections. These are just reporting on what's going on with some of these teams as they've navigated throughout fall camp, and several of which have actually closed fall camp at this point. So we're going to go through 6 programs, kind of tell you what I'm hearing right now. We will start with BYU. I just made them the Big 12 champs. So let's start here, right? Well, the receiver room has been a bit of a question mark right now, and there's a lot of people outside Provo, inside Provo that are a little curious about what the pecking order is going to look like right there, because BYU has to replace some of the best receivers from a year ago, the guys that played the most snaps last year. The only wideout on the roster who's ever cleared 400 yards in the season did so 2 years ago while playing at Stanford. So that's Tiger Bachmeier. And yes, that's Bear Bachmeier's older brother. So I'll be using first names the rest of this breakdown. Bear and Tiger. All right. JoJo Phillips has probably been the most consistent target in camp by all accounts, but it sounds like true freshman legend Glasgow. The staff's been talking about him for quite a while too, saying that he's going to play a lot here at some point. The other thing we're hearing is that their quarterback, Bear Bachmeier, granted a lot of opportunities for him to maybe leave, go somewhere else, spent his summer getting in better shape. He lost quite a bit of weight, going to make him quicker, going to make him more mobile. Now, he was a good runner last year, but he was really a power guy. I think now maybe a little shiftier version of Bear Bachmeier could be very, very important. Look at Kalani Sitake and how they've built their team, right? They build that team from the inside out. And they built it from the inside out. And look, he doesn't want his quarterback to have to single-handedly take over games. Like, we know that. So what is he going to lean on? Well, he's going to lean on LJ Martin, who continues to look the part. He's the reigning Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. Probably going to give him 20, 25 carries a game. And by the way, he's not too far away from the top of the BYU record book, right? Sione Moa is behind him, missed most of last season. So looking forward, if you look at the offensive line, that's a group that's been built into one of the best units in the country over the last few years. And they added some projected starters at the Power 4 level already, from one from Washington, one from Stanford. And yes, there is a new defensive coordinator in Kelly Papinga running his first camp. And there is some encouraging noise coming out about the secondary, which has been very, very important. They've had some guys stepping up there in the back end. But we know overall for BYU, the floor is really, really high. And the floor is what wins leagues in some cases. So there are some questions. Maybe the ceiling is a question. Is there a freshman receiver that becomes a real go-to guy by the time October rolls around? Potentially. There's also one thing that doesn't really model. Is the team that beat them twice last year and took a conference championship off of them is still potentially on that schedule in December. And almost everybody who was on the field for both those afternoons is still in the building, right? So they kind of know what to expect if you are BYU. But I think this is the year they get over the hump. And by all accounts, they've had a terrific fall camp out there in Provo. Moving over to Oklahoma. And just for the second time now, Brent Venables bringing his quarterback back, right? They returned their starting quarterback. Dillon Gabriel did it a few years back. That team went on to win 10 games. And John Mateer, he's back for his 5th year. Got a bunch of good quality starts last year. And last season was not really what he wanted, even though there were moments that were pretty dang good, right? He threw for 2,900 yards. He had 430 on the ground. He scored 8 times with his own legs, all while doing it with a broken thumb in the SEC opener. Had to miss some time and return to play Texas just 17 days after his surgery. And it had to change his grip, and the throwing motion went with it. Well, he's healthy now. And the last couple games, looks like he's a guy that could very well be in the mix for the Heisman Trophy by the end of the season. They have upgraded the supporting cast around him. People feel really, really good about what they've seen from the receiver core. And a lot of people right now are saying that Isaiah Sategna has been the best player in camp, and that it wasn't necessarily close for that offensive team. Now, the interesting part about that is they brought in Trell Harris. They brought in Parker Livingston. They brought in quality play at wide receiver, all to just take some of the pressure off of Isaiah Sategna. Well, maybe he doesn't need the pressure to be removed, right? We told you back in May that he was a top 4, top 5 receiver returning in all of college football. And everything coming out of Norman this month says that we were probably a little light. Maybe he's better than that. Maybe he's top 3 receiver in college football. Sounds like him and Mateer have picked up exactly where they left off. And people around the program are talking about him like he is the best receiver in the SEC. Not one of the best in Norman, one of the best in the league. So behind him, Elijah Thomas, it sounds like he might be the most improved player on the offense. Now, last year, the reports on him were all about flashes. Like he made big plays and had some big moments. This year, it sounded like every day he's doing something good. And there's a real chance he plays an awful lot there in the opener. The other thing we're hearing about is that Eli Bowen, probably one of the more talked about players on the defensive side of the football. Now, he sounds like interceptions have been piling up from time to time, and he's not even really played a full season yet, so that's the good news. Now, the bad news hasn't necessarily changed. There was a bit of an exodus there in the back end, right, between Bowen and Cortland Guillory. I'm saying that him and his brother Peyton, that's going to be a really strong back end, and especially with the way they rush the quarterback, they'll be just fine. I think the secondary is going to be in a really good spot. Now, there are a couple threads worth pulling here. The running back job right now is not settled. We thought maybe a month ago it was starting to settle in, but you have a transfer in Lloyd Avant, who arrived while both running backs were kind of banged up and kind of forced his way into the conversation. But the read out of camp, now that we fast forwarded to the end, it sounds like Xavier Robinson will start, but Avant will be a real weapon rather than just kind of a guy that they rely on to take some reps here or there. Now, on the offensive line, you've had a couple guys banged up throughout fall camp, but Ryan Foje has played some left tackle, has played some guard, played some center, done all 3 very well. May end up starting at center, which is a pretty good problem to have because this has been a bit of a concern for the unit as a whole, especially with guys being banged up. Also sounds like there's a true freshman in there that has played well enough to potentially be ready if they need him, and that guy's Noah Best. Now, on the edge, PJ Adebawore and Dan Okoye both had really big camps, along with Cole Sullivan getting real work at a very important cheetah position. That's the nickel safety hybrid spot. It's that hybrid linebacker safety that's fast enough to cover a slot, but big enough to also fit a run. So 10 Sooners made the preseason coaches all-SEC team, and Venables signed a nice new contract extension just a couple weeks ago. So you can make a case this is as complete a roster as he's had in Norman. But they do have a difficult schedule, right? Going to Michigan, going to Athens, all in the first 4 weeks, with 5 of their 12 opponents that finished last season in the top 18. I think 9-3 against this schedule is a playoff resume that this whole episode has been built on. If they overachieve beyond that, then we're talking about big-time top 3, 4, 5 seed, maybe 6, 7 seed. Either way, 9-3, I think, against this schedule gets them in. And based on everything I've heard in camp, Oklahoma has had a terrific camp with all the reason to believe they can easily accomplish that goal. The Texas A&M Aggies, look, the AP has them as a top 8 team. I left them out right now. Right now, first, the number that explains their offseason, right? 43 sacks last year. They were 4th in the country and 2nd in the SEC. Just 3 interceptions, though. Now, they did have some fumble recoveries, but this is a defense that really lived in the backfield. but they didn't get enough of those short fields. They didn't get enough on their hands. And that's a fixable problem, right? They have spent the entire offseason chasing takeaways. And there is a new first-year coordinator, even though we know that Mike Elko is still calling the plays. Lyle Hemphill's entire pitch has been attack and effort and urgency, with a veteran safety saying flatly that Hemphill is mixing things up and putting people in position to make plays. So if the takeaways come, then the leap could come with them. Look, both lines are being rebuilt at the same time, right? The offensive and the defensive line. They had a bunch of guys drafted. 6 of those guys got drafted in the first couple days. The offensive line lost 4 of their 5 starters, had to replace them with some quality transfers, and the defensive line lost arguably their best pass rusher. But Elko's point has been that if you had lost the offensive line, you could evaluate an unknown against a known defensive line. If you had only lost a defensive line, you could evaluate them against a known offensive line. Well, losing both makes it a little bit tougher to figure out, all right, well, is the D-line where it needs to be? Is the O-line where it needs to be? Are they both maybe down a bit? Are they both the same? We don't know. That's a tricky part about evaluating every single rep in camp, is that 2 unknowns were hitting each other. And nobody in that building or anybody that's covered it is going to know exactly what they have until they get to September. That's not pessimism. That's just knowing that there's a bit of a wait and see mode right now, and we're just a couple days away from kickoff. Also, it sounds like Marcel Reed, they have more depth at quarterback than we would imagine. And that changes the offense, believe it or not. Because if you look at Marcel Reed, look, he's gone for over 5,400 career passing yards. He's got 41 touchdowns. He's also gone for over 1,000 on the ground, right? Sounds like his footwork has taken another step. But the news is that Brady Hart is winning the quarterback 2 job outright. And last year, there wasn't a ton of confidence behind Reed. So the staff pulled back on some design quarterback runs in an effort to protect him. Well, that hesitancy is gone now. And so you have one of the more productive dual threat quarterbacks in the league just kind of got unleashed as a play call because the full-time quarterbacks coach they now feel pretty good about what they might have behind him. So you're going to see a different style of offense, one that could involve a few more quarterback runs because their backup quarterback situation is in a better spot. Now, with Holman Wiggins taking over as the offensive coordinator after Colin Klein left to take the head job at Kansas State, there's a receiver room that is deeper than we even thought about, even though there's not a first-round pick in it like there was last year. Isaiah Horton is sitting there at 6'4" on the outside. That length, they haven't had that in years. And him and Reed were 7-on-7 teammates before they even got to College Station. Terry Bussey has kind of been the talk of fall camp. Reuben Owens is back, and he should be in a really good spot. Sounds like he's making some big plays out of the backfield as well. So everything's skill position is in place. So it really comes down to whether these 5 new offensive linemen can protect long enough to use any of those tremendous skill weapons, right? Whether a defense that could not necessarily catch the ball last year because they didn't have as many interceptions, maybe they can this year. So yes, they keep talking about where they're at right now, and the team made the playoff last year. It was a tremendous achievement, and then it didn't go the way they wanted to by scoring just 3 points in the playoff. I have them just on the outside looking in right now, but if they can come together along both lines of scrimmage by October, then I will gladly address that as a miss on my part, because it's the only unknown right now that's keeping me from putting the Aggies in the playoff. The Texas Tech Red Raiders, yes, they're the Big 12 champs from a year ago. I'm projecting them to be 11-2. I'm predicting them also out of the college football playoff. And before I make my case, right, given their due, because what they did last year was bigger than what people even processed. I mean, a program record 12 wins, first Big 12 championship, first outright conference title in 70 years, and the first playoff appearance in the history of the program. So this is the biggest team, by the way, that Texas Tech has ever put on the field. There are 24 players that are listed over 300 pounds. Last year, that number was 17. And the 2008 Texas Tech team, maybe the most iconic roster in the history of the program, they had 11 players that were over 300 pounds. So this is a really big roster. They have 16 players that are 6'5" or taller. They have 31 that are 6'4". And the 5th-year left tackle, Howard Sampson, is a whopping 6'8", right? So they got some big boys up there along both lines of scrimmage. And if you listen to the GM, you listen to Joey McGuire, They wanted to build on measurables. They're also one of the oldest rosters in America. They have 22 players that are in their 5th, 6th, and 7th year. They have a tight end that's entering season number 7, and he might be a pretty good combination between being a blocker and a pass catcher. That's Jet Carpenter. So this is what actually matters as well as far as personnel on the field. Remember last year, Indiana, one of the oldest rosters in America, went on to win the title. That's kind of the goal right now for Texas Tech. Age helps. The other thing we're hearing is that Austin Romaine has been unblockable. And the reports out of Lubbock that he's been the most dominant player in camp on either side of the ball. He's been downhill against the run. He's been hitting offensive linemen the side. He's been stacking the next guy. And then as a pass rusher, because Sheil Wood has been running his linebackers through on pass rush moves, he's got some jab steps. He's got some things that you can't necessarily teach. So backs can barely get a hand on him when he's blitzing. He also had a pick 6 in the most recent scrimmage. So they had a take over the game linebacker last year, and it was incredibly important. And it might be again this year, just might be with a new addition named Austin Romaine. It also sounds like the interior of the defense is deeper than the depth chart suggests. Now, it sounds like they have a bunch of really quality pieces there that they have right on the interior. It also sounds like they have a couple freshmen. They're already forcing their way in to getting on the field, like LaDamian Guyton, who's at 17 years old and setting the edge right now against grown men. So it sounds like they have some young freshmen that are already in position to potentially get on the field as soon as humanly possible. And it sounds like Will Hammond, who played for Texas Tech last year, played quite a bit. Sounds like the passing game production is going to be in a pretty good spot. It also sounds like their running backs look pretty good as well. So looking at everything and where it all connects, there's still a couple jobs that are open. You have a safety spot that is up for debate. You have a left guard that's up for debate. But you look at the whole picture. You have a big, old, experienced football team. You have an unblockable linebacker. You have a really good interior along the defensive line and some freshmen that are too good to sit right now, plus a quarterback in the backfield that has been able to develop some rapport. So it's not necessarily a team in transition. That is a team that I think can go out and get 11 wins. I think they will. So we'll see. There is definitely a path for Texas Tech to make a run this season. Now, we'll see whether or not that run is enough to make the college football playoff. Now on to the Michigan Wolverines. And look, we went through the playoff. We don't have them in. We didn't even have them in the first 4 out. But here's the case against me, and it's a good case, right? First, it sounds like Bryce Underwood just had the best camp that anybody has reported on him, right? It sounds like offensive coordinator Jason Beck said that of all the practices they've had, 13 to be exact, all 13 were pretty good practices, right? Now, camp closed just a couple days ago, and word out of the final scrimmage is that he looks like a completely different player. He's climbing in the pocket. He's not drifting onto his back foot like he did a year ago. And you listen to the receivers, too, the way they're describing him as calmer and sharper and more precise than he was just a year ago. Now, the freshman line wasn't great, right? He had less than 2,500 yards, had just 11 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. Now, the second part is that part of the reason why he struggled was not entirely on him. If you just watched last year's tape and said that Underwood was running for his life a lot, maybe the offense didn't have a clear and focused identity, well, that was a big reason why he wasn't as successful as he could have been. And this also was a pretty conservative offense, too, last year. So you can even listen to Kyle Whittingham talk about it. I mean, he's talking multiple times throughout this offseason saying, man, I'm kind of diagnosing where our quarterback's bad year was coming from, and maybe it was a little bit of an offensive line problem. So you get the offensive line situated, you get things looking like they're in a pretty good spot. And look, they hired Jim Harding to coach that line. And he's been one of the best in college football for a long time. He's at Utah. And they're going to be great in pass protection. And they inherited a pretty full cupboard. So Michigan went into camp believing they had 8 linemen that they could trust to start in a really important season-defining game. 6 of them started multiple games last year. And roughly 2/3 of their offensive line snaps return. They believe their best offensive linemen from last year are back as well. And the one to watch is Andrew Babalola, and who is the highest rated offensive line recruit that Michigan has signed in a while and is pushing for a starting left tackle job as a true freshman before a season-ending injury. Well, he's back and competing for that job, right? You also have 2 transfers from 2 different programs that kind of said about the same thing about the roster, right? and a 6'4" wide receiver that followed Whittingham from Utah. He said that this is the most talented team he's ever been a part of. You have a safety who came in from Memphis, said the exact same thing. It's the most talent he's been around, specifically on both sides of the ball. And that safety reportedly comes down with 4 or 5 interceptions throughout fall camp. And then you look at Michigan's receivers. They're a veteran group. It's a solid group. They were asked who was giving them the most trouble. They didn't name one guy. They named the entire secondary, right? Jair Hill and Zeke Berry and Smith Snowden and a sophomore named Jordan Young. So it's a deep ball-hawking secondary going against a receiver room that's really good, headlined by Andrew Marsh, who's one of the top 5 receivers in the country. Sounds like his route running is getting praised by the defenders. And if you look at where these guys are, man, I think Michigan's roster is quite good. I really do. If you look at some of the personnel and where they're going to be, look, Michigan ran the football just fine last year, right? Against ranked opponents, it didn't work the same way. So the yardage before anybody touched their backs kind of dried up, especially between the tackles. So they're a pretty good run team against everybody except for the teams that matter. Well, Whittingham, he didn't install a system in Ann Arbor. I mean, he kind of imported an identity and imported a few Utah coaches, a few Utah players throughout. Remember, he won 177 games at Utah. So if the pass protection can get fixed, and it sounds like it will, if the run game can show up against quality competition, then Michigan could very easily be a college football playoff team. But I have to see it against somebody first. The good news is Michigan plays against Oklahoma in the second week of the season. And I have Oklahoma in my field at 9-3. I have Michigan out of our field right now. I think they could potentially be an 8-4, 9-3 football team as well. So looking at Michigan, still believe they have the possibility of getting in this mix. Just not there right now. Got to see the quarterback's progress before I'm willing to make a determination. The Washington Huskies, we haven't talked a ton about Washington, but it sounds like they are a finished product because camp closed. They had an 81-play mock game in there at Husky Stadium. Sounds like Jed Fish. Everyone knows who's playing. Everything left right now is rotational depth. So this is year 3 of a new-looking program. They're not searching for anything in late August. That gives it a bit of an edge. And also, the quarterback, Damon Williams, yes, did go to the portal for a moment, reversed it, was back in no time. He's a top-tier quarterback in the league right now. And that, I think, is going to be very interesting. And a lot of people disagree on where Washington is. Like the AP, they have them at 17. The coaches poll has them at 19. Several national outlets, some have them as high as 10th, right? So a 9-spot spread on the same team in the same week from people who do this for a living usually means the roster is in a pretty good spot. So Fish's first offseason a while back, they had to replace nearly 2/3 of the roster, which people already forgot happened. And the last 2 have been a little calmer, and it compounded, right? They went 9-4 last year. That was 3 more wins than the season before. Improvement in 11 of 12 categories that you would evaluate quality in. And now a recruiting class that was one of the tops that they've had in the last 5 or 6 years. So they'll open with the Apple Cup, and I do not love the draw for the other guys, right? I think Washington is a team on the board right now that is very, very likely to make all of us wrong because they do not have a lot of significant question marks coming out of fall camp. Well, that'll do it. This is always a show and an episode that lives on over and over and over again. People say how wrong we were. Look, we shot our shot. We might be totally wrong. Ohio State might not win the Big Ten. Miami might not win the ACC. BYU might not beat Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. Notre Dame might not be undefeated. Alabama might not go 10-2 and make the college football playoff. We're rolling the dice on a 9-3 Oklahoma team in the field over an 11-2 Texas Tech team that's outside looking in. So we are probably going to be wrong about a lot of this, but that's the beauty. This is how we think the season's going to play out. We're trying to project. We're trying to forecast. Could go totally sideways if a guy gets hurt in week 2. But it's fun. I'm sure you disagree. I'm sure you're thinking I'm being harsh. No, I just think with where we're going in the playoff, I think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to have even more clout this upcoming season, knowing that a decision on the future of the playoff is waiting in the wings. We'll see. Week 0 is Saturday. We will have our Week 0 preview show out in just a day or two. So we're already breaking those games down. We're breaking down those teams. And then, man, next week, it's full speed ahead. So we're excited to have you with us. lock in here at Always College Football. Go and subscribe to the podcast. Doesn't matter where you get it. Any podcast platform, we're there. You can subscribe, you can rate, you can review, whatever you want. That's awesome. We're just greatly appreciative of those of you that decide to spend your college football preparation hours with us. We also appreciate those of you that join us on the ESPN College Football YouTube page, so check us out there as well. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, and intern Charlie, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.